So now once we've built these two switchable and settable classes, everything becomes much simpler in terms of our devices. Okay, so here are the device classes for the light, the dimmable light, and the heating. They only require an init method because everything else, all the stuff to do with switching on and off and changing the setting, is all in the parent classes, in the switchable and settable classes. So the light class is just that bit of code. All it has is an init method to create the light and save the name. And in fact, that's all it does, and it just saves the name. Basically, it sets the radio button to being nothing for the moment, and just prints out that the light has been initialized. Sets it off, so on is set to false, so it's off. Dimmable light, the bit that is very similar, except that here we pass in the name and the brightness. So the brightness here is the initial brightness, not so it knows it's going to be brightness that it's controlling in a dimmable light, but we pass in the initial value, which we usually use as 350, and then we set up some maximum and minimum. So again, very minimal class. There's not very much code in there. It's all code that we've seen before. It's just that we've now moved all the bits of code that are common to all these classes to other places. The heating, again, heating's very similar to the dimmable light. As you can see, it's got almost exactly the same stuff, except that now we don't even pass in the name because we've only got one heating thing. So we just pass in the heating and we pass in the temperature. Obviously, if you wanted to have more heating things, then you'd have to pass in the name. So you could adjust these. These are just set up for this particular example to show the different ways that I can configure this. And so these classes, I've decided to put them all in. So the lights, like we did in the previous example, they all live in one file. The heating lives in another file. You could even put all of these classes in the same file. So all your devices could be in one file, where each class essentially just has an init method. Looking at the other things, the music player, it's a little bit more involved because it does have some extra functionality that isn't defined in switchable and settable. So remember, music player has a way of setting it to play and pause. So these methods need to be different. The additional methods that aren't defined in the settable and switchable classes. And because of those things, I've also got some methods here that override the switch off from the settable class and the status as well. So in terms of how you build these things, you need to think about what's common to all the classes. So here we've got lots of different classes, but they've basically all got the same code in common. So we can make use of that by creating these superclasses that are inherited from, and both of them can be inherited. And but if we've got some specialist classes, then we may need to keep that code in the lower classes. Oh, and I forgot the most important thing. In order to inherit from two classes, here, so light and the dimmable light and the heating, they inherit from those two classes, and so I just put them as the two classes with a comma between them. Okay, so previously when we inherited from one class, in fact, there it is. The light inherits from switchable, so it's just light and it's switchable. The dimmable light inherits from settable and the light. Or actually, I could change that. I could just make that inherit from the switchable class. So it could be, yeah. So at the moment, the dimmable light is a child of the light class and the settable, but it could equally be a child of the settable and the switchable. If you think about, sorry if that was a bit of a rushed explanation, but if you think about the functionality that's needed, it just needs to be able to, dimmable light needs to be switchable and settable. So I could put either thing there. Like the heating is inheriting from switchable and settable. Think about what do we need inside this class. I need the functionality to turn it on and off. I need the functionality to turn it up and down. And they come from those parent classes. So the syntax for including those things as parent classes is just, you just put a list of classes. I've got 2 here, but you can have more. They can inherit from multiple classes. Okay, some notes about that. The controller for this is exactly the same as the previous version. So the controlling code, I will show you that very quickly, but it's exactly the same as before. We just create the things we need, put them in an array, and then we have this loop that deals with what happens when they're switched on and off, and a GUI that reflects that. So if I just run that, they're initialized. It asks your name, and there's the GUI. And when I change that, when I say heating up, and when I hit return, you'll see the slider will move there to 19. Keep hitting return, it just moves. And if I turn it on, you'll see I don't know if you saw that, but the radio button changed. So it's exactly the same. All that code is exactly the same as the previous versions. Nothing has changed. We've just got much cleaner and much better code for implementing the devices. As I said when we were looking at it, the MusicPlayer overrides some of the methods in the switchable class just because I want to be able to say whether it's playing or paused. And none of the other devices have that, so I haven't created a special playable class. I could do that. If we had multiple devices that could play, I might create another parent class, a playable class, that would go alongside the switchable and the settable. And also, I identified when we looked at these in the previous video that the 2 switchable and settable classes, the parent classes, they've both got a status method. Switchable.status just prints out on or off. Settable.status also prints out the setting when the device is on. And the solution, how do you know which one of those you're going to get? So you've got 2 possibilities. When the heating calls its status method, how do you know whether you get the one from the switchable class or the settable class? And the solution is, as I said, Python is quite pragmatic. You list the parent classes in the order that you want them to take priority. So I've listed them. I think if we go back to the there you are, MusicPlayer or the heating, it's listed as settable and then switchable. And the reason for doing that is that when I call the status method, or when the status method gets called in the heating class to say what the status is, it will use the settable version of status rather than the switchable version of status. And the settable version of status, going back, no, let's not go back, let's look at the code. The settable version of status, there it is, it prints out whether it's on, and it also prints the setting, which is what the temperature is for the oven. The switchable version of status just prints out whether it's on or off. So you have to be slightly careful there. But if you want it to inherit a particular method, use the order of the inheritance. So the order of the classes, the parent classes that you list, will determine which of the methods gets inherited. Okay, that's pretty much all I want to say about polymorphism. Hopefully, even if you haven't had a chance to try it out, or you're not going to try it out, it'll show you that it's kind of giving you a nice way of cleaning up the code. So actually, I think this version of the code is the cleanest we've got, because when I look at the lights, basically the lights only contain stuff about lights. The lights file only contains stuff about the lights. It doesn't contain anything about switching and setting, because they all live in the parent classes. So I've separated out all the different bits of functionality into the 2 parent classes, settable and switchable, and then the device classes, the lights, the heating, and so on, just have those, just have the bits that I need for that particular device. Okay, I'll finish the video there, and then we'll move on to look at abstraction.